Hello, good evening. Welcome to the Architectural Association. It's my great pleasure to introduce Dyvik Kahlen Architects tonight. I've kind of been been at the jury just until now, so I didn't have much time to prepare this talk. But one thing that I think is special about those two is that both of them are students from the school. They both graduated from the AA. And as far as I know, none of them went to work for any other big firm, as a lot of the graduates from the AA do. So there's a trend nowadays that once you have your diploma, that you go and work for a large office in order to learn the trade and maybe put something on your CV. And I think what's particular both of them is that they started to do something that's, I think, maybe something one used to say about the AA students is that they're not easily molded and not easily put into some kind of conventional context. So in the past, an AA graduate would last 2 weeks in an office, even if it's very high-powered, because they just simply couldn't deal with the normality of things. So in a sense, I think that's really fantastic to see that they set out on their own and that they have actually quite a respectable repertoire of things to show without taking anything away at this stage. Maybe one more thing to say is I was just told that I was on the interview of Chris, which I totally forgot. So I have a little bit to do with that, letting him into the school. And at the end, I think Max and Chris met each other at George's famous Dip 5 unit. I'm not sure when you started to think of working together, also because you have quite a different background, which I don't know too much about. But I think with any further delay, please welcome Max and Chris, Dyvik Kahlen Architects. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so Christopher, I'm Max. We graduated actually 2008 here at the AA. We then both worked for a year in different practices. After that, we started our own practice together, which is in January pretty much 5 years from now. The office is called Dyvik Kahlen Architects, as Valentin mentioned, and it's based in Clerkenwell. And in there we work together with another architect, that's Daniel, who joined us this year. In the same building, there's another friend and architect, Gustus Brown, who we consider part of our working context as much as we consider the AA as part of our context where we have conversations. And that's been ongoing for the last 6 years, where Chris did media study courses and I've been teaching Diploma in the first year studio. Chris.
Basically, our main aim is to build buildings, and we don't care the type or the scale or the budget. And we designed everything from umbrella stands to student housing complexes. Another thing that's been important for us is that Max is from Germany, I'm from Norway. So we've been able to have quite a variety of contexts to work within, other than just here in the UK. And these are a selection of projects we've been working on, just to give you a feeling of what we do. And the first top left is a office competition we did in Leipzig. The top center is an apartment building that we just sent in for planning, which is in Aachen in Germany. There's an exhibition design we're working on at the Barbican, which will open in February. And then on site, the bottom left is a rooftop extension we're doing in Cologne, which will finish perhaps April.
April, March.
And in the center, there's an exhibition design we did together with SAC Group, which are here, in 2012. And finally, there's a recent refurbishment of the bookshop in Whitechapel Gallery. But today we're going to talk about 6 other projects that we, some have been built, some not, which are obviously we're quite fond of.
Yeah, we like lists, we just made a list. They're from different times. I thought that was important, but they all have some kind of idea that we thought that we like, or that we thought it might be nice to talk about. But beside those 6 projects, we thought there were two topics that might be nice to talk about, also in relation to the title, What's Next? And they will be linked to the project, so they will appear and disappear. So one is about representation. And there's 2 things. There's the representation in the design process, the collage. So one thing we try to do is to link as close as possible the collage with the design, so you see what you get, where there's no transition, as direct as possible. That's one thing, but then on the other hand, there's also once you do finish something, it's the question, what do you do? Do you take photographs, and how do you represent the actual building, or maybe you want to represent the project of that is the building. So that's something we are just about to tap into, which is, we thought, really interesting, and we rather treat it as an open question than there's no solution. And what is also really interesting is this is like a cycle. You do collages, and then you imagine the space, and then you ask a friend or photographer to take photographs, and then you suddenly see the space through the eyes from someone else. And that starts to influence you the way you do the collages again. So it's a bit of a cycle, which is quite interesting to be aware of, because the way you represent, the way you draw, and the way you make your models, it affects a lot the way you think the space and the way you develop ideas or talk to your client or to yourself. And then the other topic is twins. So yeah, it's twins. It's a bit awkward, but there's something about it which does somehow consciously or unconsciously run through quite a lot of the projects, actually. In some cases, it's an active discussion. In some cases, we actually find out afterwards. And what's interesting with twins is that it's repetition, but not really. It's 2 things. It's not 3. It's not 4. So if you repeat one thing 10 times, there's always a graduation or a tendency. But if you have 2, you never know who's who, who's the real one, who's the wrong one. So it does end up in a conversation about the difference and indifference between 2 things, which is sometimes helpful in a kind of a design conversation. So then maybe as the last comment before we jump into the first project, as Valentin mentioned, we were in Dip 5 back then, which was Georges Legendre. And what was interesting is the way he talked with us and the way he wanted us to discuss the work, which was mainly based on drawing and models, is he wanted to talk just about the thing, not to talk around the thing. So we try to be, in that manner, we try to be as direct as possible in explaining the projects we've been working on, and somehow the ideas related to it, to the form and to the space. Should we start with the first?
Yes.
Okay, the kitchen table. That's the site. It's a really beautiful long kitchen, back extension of a terrace house. What's special with this one is that it's, usually in English terrace houses, the extension is flat and short, or wide and short. But this one is actually, it's really long and narrow. So the table that there used to be is too short. So the brief was fairly simple. It's a long table. The only constraint is it should be around 4 to 5 meters long. You should get it through the door, and it would be nice to put a part of it or the table out in the garden for, have lunches during the day. We picked 2 references together with the client that she really liked and we thought were very interesting, which both from Corbusier, and there's something really nice about these ones. Those set of tables and benches with, the legs are slightly chubby, and there's this bluish tone, a bit like elephant feet. So there's something about the proportion or misproportion of elements. And then this one, it's just a table. It's a horizontal surface, and it's like fit slightly ad hoc in that situation, but it works. So they're a bit in the wrong order, so I go a bit back and forth. So yeah, the idea was just do a table, 4 legs, 1 surface, and not so much fuss around. But the thing is, had to be a long one. So the idea is to make 2 tables. And then there's obviously the question, do you just put 2 tables next to each other? It's supposed to be 1 long table. So the main challenge was actually the legs and how do they sit together. Then another thing was we wanted round legs, and we pushed them as awkwardly close to the corner. Usually you leave a bit of tolerance so you can, I don't know, it's a bit safe. But we thought it's nice to push it as far as we can to the edge, so you have the round versus the square. And then obviously the question, what do we do with that middle leg? You can either do everywhere you do half legs, and then you can keep on repeating. So if the family grows, you get 10 more tables. But then it's that somehow it's not the right thing. So we thought the middle leg is half, and the other legs are normal. So it's slightly asymmetric. So that's the table in the space. Red leg. The other thing is we try to, the surface is 2 layers of MDF, this colored MDF, and then varnished. So you do expose the layers of it, and you do expose, you see it's a thin table, so you'll need a bit of steel to span the 2.5 meter. Or 2.40 meters. So you read the table a bit like sediments, and then obviously when you pull them apart, you'll reveal the section exactly through the leg. So if they stand alone, they half is missing. If they stand together, it's a coherent table. Should I say something to that?
No, I think it's good.
It's the last image, so.
We're just a bit surprised that it's the finished product in the end looks almost like a collage. It looks the same as we collaged it. It's something we start to experience these days when you actually produce buildings or objects.
Because it was the question, you represent it and you have it in your mind, and then when it's finished, do you want it to look exactly like you've thought, or do you want it to, be either surprise you, usually better in a positive? That's the first one.
The small house, some people, they call it the smallest house in Britain. It's a tiny property that is in Islington. It was used at some point as a flower shop. And our client, he bought it in, 2009. It's a former AA student who moved to Holland, and he's now a developer. And together with him, we developed the idea of transforming this little sort of flower shop into like a pied-à-terre in London. You can see the white little dot is the site. So it's sitting in between two terraced houses. That's the old facade, and it's listed. So we were not allowed to touch it. And we proposed to demolish everything else. But whatever we put in were not to be seen from the street, basically. So we could excavate a bit to gain a bit more space. And we could go slightly up with the pitch of the roof, but that's it. But otherwise it had to look the same. And that's what we introduced behind the existing facade, which is a prefabricated structure that consists of basically entrance space, kitchen, living room, a bedroom, and a bathroom. And the project, in many ways, it's working with levels. No, it's working in section, and you have the lower ground floor with the kitchen and the entrance space. Then you have a living room platform. Then you walk on top of the kitchen worktop to get up to the platform and eventually you can sit down on the bed. And hidden behind or underneath the bed to the right is the tiny bathroom. And it was very important that the different levels had to somehow perform different functions because it's so small, so everything is on top of each other. That's the plan. And
yeah, there's a little garden in front, or
we introduced a new garden to create a bit of privacy between the street and the living room.
So you have the entrance, the bathroom, kitchen, and the living room.
And obviously it is very small, but at the same time it feels incredibly spacious and generous because of the height compared to the width of the building. That's the different levels within the building. And these collages describe the two sort of main spaces in the house, which is one is the more public living room that faces the street with a big window to the right. And then you have the more private, intimate, sort of secret bedroom upstairs underneath the arch. And this curved roof or the arched roof really helped to make the space feel much more spacious and continuous in a way.
At that stage we still had, it was like a long curtain, which is you won't find on the images later, where the staircase would kind of jump over the curtain. Got a bit too complicated. Maybe one thing that we tried in this case, the building is so small that when you take pictures on the inside, you want to see a person inside, because you want to see how a person uses the space. And once they moved in, and then you go and try to take pictures, and you ask someone to walk through the space, it feels really awkwardly staged. It's almost proposing a lifestyle as that's how you should live. So instead of doing that, we thought we only present to you the construction images, not because we want to show you how to build a house, but what is really interesting is the workers, they inhabit the space in a way as naturally as a person later would use the space. They have tools, they place the tools on the steps, and they place. So in a way, what we thought, we're going to go quite quickly through the images, but we'll try to talk about the space and not how it's built. So I thought that was maybe enough to say.
We built the house, prefabricated it in Holland. Then the client had his own workshop, so he was closely connected throughout the whole building process. And what was quite fascinating is we were allowed to somehow build it in one-to-one and then continuously change the proportion or the materials or the scale of things while it was in the workshop. And It was quite a nice way of designing, almost on the go. Here's the existing facade, and then the new building being lifted in. That's the back, the neighboring gardens, but you never have access to this garden. You only look onto it.
It's almost my favorite picture, this one. Not because it's not a perfect picture, but it kind of portrays quite well the character of the space, because you have that extreme proximity between the inside and the outside, and especially to the back, because of problems with overseeing each other's gardens. The windows had to be very small, so you get that these plain walls with these small openings, and then the split levels that show parts of legs or parts of feet, because you kind of live very close to each other. So the second platform beside the steel, there's this steel walkway. The bed is a frame in itself, and it's suspended from this one little rod, which also has all the kind of the light fittings. And you see here the back garden, which is very typical London back garden, actually really nice. And the whole area is nice. So because it has it's so close to the street, you have the garden. There's a park on the opposite side, which obviously makes it. If it was on a high street somewhere, it would be quite different. But in this particular case, it worked.
It's quite nice with the proximity from the bedroom to downstairs and the outside. And also the proximity between the different levels, obviously, from the bedroom down to the kitchen, for instance. Back out to the garden. That's the client who's involved in building it together with us and the carpenters. And then we thought it would be nice to sum up with a soft material, so we used leather. So when you wake up and you walk on the steel, it would be quite soft and warm.
That's how you imagine, huh?
Give coffee to your...
Exactly, you sleep above, and your boyfriend or girlfriend gives you coffee through the...
And then also we wrapped the bed frame in felt to make it soft and not almost airy, like a cloud. And it also worked really well to make it much more domestic somehow, softened the space. That's the garden. That's the dining room. And then we sprayed the bathroom in this polyurethane, because the walls are so close to you, so you can't really use tiles because it's too cold. So we thought this would be a better way to seal the bathroom.
Yeah, the sink is a bit of a coincidence. So you have the chopping board fits exactly into the sink, and then somehow the handle is right at the point where the water drops in. So you can leave because there's not much space on the kitchen bench, so you can still use the water and chop tomatoes at the side. It's also like boats. The more storage you have, the better. So the whole living platform is one piece of storage with a bed. There's a guest bed in that storage as well.
Corner. stairs. What's also quite nice is you constantly move up and down or in between the different levels, so therefore you always perceive the space from different, and also the surroundings from different levels.
And then once you arrive in the bed, you can't look out and no one can look in. And then it's quite private. So you hear the street, you hear the people passing by, but no, you can't. You know you're not seen, except you can look out. There's one little window above the bed, so you can see the sky. Next project. So we're moving to Germany, Kassel. It's the Fridericianum foyer that was a collaboration with Gregory and Zach from Zach Group. And they have reworked the identity of the museum. And the museum, since I think 1955, it's hosting the Documenta, and since then been a pivot point for contemporary art. And that's the ground floor. And we were looking in specifically in that foyer. So part of the redesign of the identity for the whole place was to change the foyer.
And then the brief was to put a reception, a bookshop, a cafe, what else? And also be able to use it as an event space or as a lecture hall.
And the nice thing is that this, you see here, this is an exhibition space. This rotunda is another exhibition space. And this one it's called the Kunstverein, which is, it's partly connected from time to time. So this whole foyer function as, it's quite nice as an empty room and as a hinge between all those, between that place and that place. And there's a really big square right in front. So in a way, we were trying to introduce all those functions without necessarily subdividing the space in very clear zones. So we try to furnish it in a way that it still feels like an empty room. You enter and you have enough space to, orientate yourself, and key for that was the decision to say, this is the main door, this is the main access to the exhibition, that's the other one. And these two doors, we don't really need them, so we filled them with bookshelves. The same way we put benches into these two doors, and they became niches to sit. So, because it's always slightly uncomfortable if you have a big empty space and then you sit on a chair, kind of lost in the corner. So suddenly they become anchors for some seating arrangement. So what happens is you still have, we underline these two central axes, and then that's the reception, and this one is like a book table. But what was important about the reception is usually you enter a museum and then there's a direction to the ticket counter. There's a front and a back. And then in this case we thought it's nice if there's no front and back. So it's a volume along which you circulate. And well, the good thing is there's not thousands of people coming every day. So it allows you to have so you buy your ticket over the corner. So it makes it a slightly more direct relationship or personal relationship with the people that work there. And the guards, they always walk around. So they come around and then it becomes more like a kitchen island. view. That's the arrangement. This island you can split into two parts and then move them around in order to be more flexible. There you see the arch doors filled with books. And this is the insertion. It looks a bit like a tree, Christmas tree. It's not a Christmas tree. It's a steel shelf that has exactly the shape of the arch, and it just sits in the arch. So we're not filling it that way. So it's a shelf standing in an arch, which is slightly different things. It's not touching it in any way. That's the reception desk in the, let's say, the reception mode with a cafe on one side, and that's for events. They can put them together as a long bar, so it's more functional with fridges and all those things. So you see, you enter, and actually reception and bookshop is on the perimeter, and the first thing you see is actually the exhibition. So that was one of the points that were really important to us and to Zach and Gregory, is that somehow there's more direct relationship between the foyer and the surrounding spaces. So if you turn left now, very German people standing in there. But I think it's exactly the kind of feeling we're looking for, which is it's kind of an empty space, which gives you just enough time for a whole school class to arrive, and you see that's the reception desk. That's the other view, which looks straight to the other exhibition. You see on the corner, that's one of the sitting niches. And this is part of the new topography of Zach. And that's the other way around. You're in exhibition, you're looking back to the foyer. So somehow it's always the relation between closed doors or blocked doors and see-through doors. Yeah, you want to talk? Sure.
No, this is the niche again. We placed these benches next to the doors that lead to the park outside, which creates more like an intimate zone. And we also designed tables and lights, as you'll see. The trick with this was somehow to make it, we wanted to make the element feel solid or have a certain presence in the room. And we chose this pattern because it felt more like, almost like a stone texture from afar. And you have that solid presence. And then when you move closer, it becomes more like a surprise. It's more like just a graphical thin pattern that gives it a certain lightness. This is the book stands. That's the bookshelf again. Some benches and tables. Here it's being used for talk. That's the kind of proximity we're talking about between the people working there and the clients that we quite like. That's an umbrella stand. That's a magazine holder. A bar table.
This shelf, if you fill it with books, it's about 1.5 tons. So it was somehow trying to make it land on the ground as if there's nothing. All right. We're staying in Germany, going to Aachen. It's an unbuilt project, one quite early. It's called, it's called Twin House. You see here, that's very old Aachen city fabric. That's the site. The main road is here. So it's about a courtyard type. That's the typical street house. Then you have you walk through the gate, and we're talking about that space, which is, you come in here. It is a typical, like not a warehouse, but a workshop space. So that's the front facade. Then this is the building we were converting. You see again the courtyard. And if you go one back, it's this type where, you have a ground floor unit and then an external staircase which goes up to the top floor. Next one. And the whole setting was really nice, so we didn't want to do too much to it. And we were aware it was more like a feasibility study, so we could, we were not too concerned with practical implications at this point. So if you go back to the plan, the idea was you see that's the top floor. You go up the stair, you have a little terrace here. We moved the door, we closed that door, and you enter from here. And the idea was to keep that room intact as a room, because there's only windows to the front. And the only thing we introduced was a glass wall here, and then a kind of a toilet unit there. So it's and this kitchen element. So if you go one slide forward, see that's the kitchen unit. And if you look back, this is the view to the bedroom, where you have two layers. You have the glass, and then you have the curtains. And you can close the curtains and still hear what's going on. You could also close the glass, leave the curtain open, or close everything. And then behind that mirror, there's the wardrobe on the one side, and then on the other side, it's the bathroom. But somehow that's all about that project. There's not more to it. But somehow it's stuck. We're still hoping to find the right space to do something like that. But now we're actually coming to the twin, which is here. And what is interesting, you already walked through like one house. You walked into a courtyard. And now you have to get over to here. So you're going to walk through here, which is that gate. And it took us quite a while to convince the council to, because it's all listed, to actually build a door that looks very natural to the space. So because there was nothing before. So you enter here, you go into that courtyard, and then we thought, why not add another courtyard? So we introduced this one. If you go one more slide. That's elevation. It's a difficult site. So the problem is, if you go back, this is all firewall. So the only way to get light is to the front. There's no other orientation. Plus the firemen, they can't cut the corner with their long ladder. So we'll have to have two fire exits. And that's the moment where you realize that these guys on the left are actually not so stupid. So we borrowed the idea of the external staircase and then introduced it as an element in the new proposal. But we thought it's nice if this staircase shouldn't be just a fire exit. So we thought to give it a dialogue there's an outer staircase and there's the inner staircase. And you see it here, there's on the back, that's where it's dark, that's where all the functional rooms are. To the front, this is a series of rooms. And the rooms, they always have two views. They have a view to the outside, and then they have let's say, a big door to that circulation core, which gets the light from the top. So there's a steel staircase here and a steel staircase there. So that's where it's two houses, so we thought it was important to have two entrances. So once you enter, you have another layer, which is, this whole facade is south-facing, and there's neighbors looking at you from the other side. It's very close. So we thought it's nice to at least have the the possibility to have another skin that sits in front of your facade. So you could completely close it off. Now we're on the first floor. So you see these are the bedrooms. You could put a partition wall and then you have to get beds. But what was important is that you have the views across the whole building. So there's never a dead end. So here in that view, you're standing here, looking through the hallway, which is this one, and then into it's either closet or bathroom. This was from a slightly earlier iteration. This is when you stand outside on the steel staircase. But what you feel you're in a room, it's always nice if a room has double aspects. If you know you can go that way, but you can also go the other way. You could leave the house. If you come back late, you just go up here into your room. That's the ground floor where, in the unfurnished stage, with a staircase on one side. Okay, Chris is cutting in here.
So
you tell us if we're going too much into detail here.
The warehouse apartment, it's a conversion of a artist's warehouse in Kilburn, and the brief was to basically make rooms for them. There was 4 bedrooms and a studio space that we were to insert into this existing open plan living space. And it's quite a beautiful space. We have view 360 degrees, and the challenge was how to somehow keep the feeling of this open plan space while introducing walls, basically, or rooms. Maybe you talk about that one.
Yeah, it's a bit sad to put 5 rooms on such a floor. So we try the hybrid. So basically, we decided what is the main room, and it's this one, this whole square, which is the main living space, the kitchen, and it's like an open plan. What is very special about that building is that the entrance is from a staircase that comes from the ground floor up. So you actually arrive, and you arrive in the middle of a really tall space, and then storage and kitchen wraps around this. And you have 3 bedrooms here, then a 4th bedroom on top of this as a mezzanine, and then a 5th office space on top of this part. So there's a mezzanine here and a mezzanine there. So that's this central element. It's like an island where you constantly circulate around it, and you cook here, and you kind of look all the way out. So here you see that the one really important thing that seems very characteristic to the space is these big windows. And there's a rhythm to the windows. So we continued the rhythm with those doors here. They're really big. There's 280 by, I think, 160 double doors. So you can shut them all off, and then you have your private bedrooms, but you can also open them all the way up, and you still get this, you look all the way through your apartment. Then there's these 2 mezzanines again, and they're looking at each other. If you go 1 floor up, they just have a glazed facade on that side and on that side. And this is the office. And the only way we try to influence the space and the way you kind of perceive the space is, one has a hidden staircase, which is hidden behind one of the double doors. And then the other one has like an external staircase. So the way you approach instantly affects the way you feel in the space, because you do feel much more hidden here than you do here, even though they have the same facade. Section. So that's the mezzanine looking to the living side. So the office is up here. That's the bathroom and the larder. Before, the bathtub was just in the middle of the space and everyone was using the bathtub there. So there was no, so it was okay to have it fairly exposed. But we do, here's like sliding door tracks that run all the way along the thing. So you have large sliding doors that you can totally open the bathroom or you can close it. The other side has these 3 doors. And when they open, they reveal the staircase that goes up and then the view into the other spaces. Yeah. Maybe one thing to mention is, with the small house, we showed you those pictures during construction. So in this case, we tried the other way around. Antoine, the photographer we work with, he came actually a few weeks ago, so it's fairly recent. And we waited a couple of months. So the client started to live in the space, they furnished it. So it's the contrary to the small house. And that's a view, if you go back, it's a bit of the hopper view that you're outside the building, you're looking towards the back, and there's a cemetery. So you see the transparency of the building and the big windows.
Here you can see the big doors and that lead to the bedrooms on one side.
We try, maybe one thing, we try to dissolve the kitchen a little bit. Because usually the kitchen is this big thing where you have cupboards and closets. And so the kitchen is a hybrid of, it's partly part of that island we looked at, but then partly it's made out of pieces of furniture that just stand next to each other. So they are obviously fixed to the ground, and there's, because that thing wouldn't stand by itself otherwise, but so that it works more with this idea of the open plan that you have in that space.
There you see the green staircase that leads upstairs to the bedroom and the entrance below. That's the more open living room underneath the other mezzanine. The staircase again.
There was this deal with authority, how to insulate this whole place. And the idea was, in order to leave the bricks on the ground, on the first floor exposed, was to insulate the roof as much as we could. This was a really cheap project, so we did cut corners where we could cut corners. And the magic solution was to apply this spray foam. So the whole ceiling is sprayed, so you got this really soft texture. So you do read the rhythm of the roof structure, but it's a bit like covered in one soft material and then painted white. That's quick. I think that's the last one.
Arch Studio. And this is an art, or it's a studio for a stage designer in just below Muswell Hill, where we're going on site in January, I think, hopefully. It's on a very, very low budget, which we enjoy quite a lot. It's a challenge to build, the client wants to build a new studio in one of these arches. She's quite lucky because she lives just behind the arch. So you can see the number 8 here is the arch that we're going to put our new building, and then behind is her apartment. So she can basically walk through her garden down into the studio. But the brief also, she also wanted to have the possibility of renting it out to another artist or designer or wherever. And therefore, it needed to have two entrances, a front entrance and a back entrance. So I'll go into that later, but that's the view from on top of the arch. So it's quite a nice situation. So you'll have a great view from inside the studio. Even though the studio is a bit lower, it's still, you have a similar view. That's the arch itself. So we're going to demolish this one and put a new building. That's the collection of all the different types that exist at the moment with our new proposal in the middle.
This is actually reality. It's not a collage. That's the one we're proposing. There's this issue, there's this thing, everyone who lives behind here, they do enjoy looking through the gap. So those units been lucky, they filled it quite early, but so we can't go all the way up to the arch, which we had to deal with somehow. You would want to, but it would block the whole view from the neighbors through it.
Also, we just started to design the unit next door, actually. We're making a cupcake factory on this one. That went in for planning last week. So there's coming another twin to this one.
Yeah.
That's the plan, where you have, basically what we proposed is two spaces with each have their own entrance, but it creates this nice, interesting idea of how you could circulate the space from, they're both the same spaces, but they have two different views. So we're quite curious how it's going to be perceived.
We have no interior view, but you have to imagine she comes from here. Let's say that's the back of the arch, that's the front. So her colleague or the person she's renting this studio to, she approaches from here into here, and she has the window out to the street, while the client, she comes from the back, and she has the window looking back at her house, which means that elevation is exactly the same as that elevation, it's just mirrored. So if you were a kid running all the way around, you just keep on going, it's like a déjà vu, you go through the same again and again. And we have a model, we didn't bring it, but it sounds really banal, but it's really intriguing. It's like something is wrong. Because anyway. I get, sorry. No, go on. Maybe the trick was we couldn't fill it, so we decided to put a rooftop on the top. So this is the railing, so you can have a barbecue on the roof and have the nice view with the arch on the top. If you go back once more. I mean, the thing is, it's super cheap. I mean, we're having problems to find the right builders, but so all we end up with is there's not much choice for material because you just go for the cheapest. So all we end up is the decision where to place the window in relation to the door. So it becomes more a composition. So how do you what's the size of the window? What's the relationship of the door to the ground and that little step? I think that's the last slide, actually. All right.
That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I was just curious as to, you mentioned in the beginning about representation and things like that maybe were informed by things that you did as students at the AA, but I was just wondering how did you decide to start the practice together, but also what do you think from your work while you were students carried forward into your practice? If at all.
I think that, we started because we had a commission to do a house in Germany, and that somehow that started the whole practice. In terms work and how it relates to this, what we did here. There was quite a sudden shift from going from school to working and designing buildings.
I think we actually changed quite a lot.
Yeah, and we also, I think we did, yeah.
Because I think it's not the obvious things that carry on. It's actually the things you probably maybe that the tutors gave you on the way on a more unconscious level. So maybe that's why well, that was a little introduction. I think the way how our tutor back then, because we went to the same unit for the final project, I think the care with which we discussed the work, I think that's something that could carry on. It's not that, I don't know, not necessarily the methodology or the way of drawing or the way of making models. It somehow surprisingly changes to do with, suddenly there's different time scales, and you keep on, I don't know, talking to others, and it changes. So I think it's more in between the lines, those influences that carry on or survive.
I think I was going to ask you about your choice of materials, and I know you might say it's a lot to do with economy and the budget of your project, but I don't think that's necessarily true. You could have made the smallest house entirely out of plywood, and the choice of colors are, I think, very particular and very carefully chosen. So if you could maybe say something about that, also because you seem to be, you are two authors working on one project, and I think you're also both very, very different. I mean, substantially different. So how do you come up with these choices of materials, and how do you kind of agree at the end, maybe?
We don't necessarily agree. I think that's for sure. So it's a lot of, it's a lot of conversation. Well, there's a very practical way of working, which is each of us is responsible for one project. So usually there's one person who, and then we show it to each other, and then we have a conversation. But then when it comes to material choices, most of the project, the small house was actually fairly expensive, considering that it's quite small. But so we could have chosen other things. Maybe we do have a desire for just those type of materials, which are but also quite nice if you don't have to think too much about material. In a way, it's important, but at the same time, it's also, you get used to to different kinds of materials, and then it's more a matter of how do you arrange the space, or how do you,
Well, thank you very much for showing your work. Good night.